Welcome to That Annuity Show, the podcast that will make you an expert in explaining annuities to your clients. Give us 30 minutes each week and we'll shave hours from your client presentations. Now, here's your host, Paul Tyler.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of That Annuity Show. Tisa, it's great to have you here again.
Good morning, Paul. Thanks for having me. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah. And we have a conversation, I know, on some topics pretty close to your heart, Tisa. Bruno?
Good morning, Paul.
Yeah. Canada is still in good shape, correct? Yes.
So far, yes.
Good. Glad to hear
We're working
that.
on it.
Yeah. Countries not in the news are a good place to be, I think, today. Listen, today we have a great returning guest. I think the fact she came back says volumes about the crowd, our company. But I want to welcome Emma Roloff, who is co-founder and principal consultant at Roloff Consulting. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, well, I think the last time we had you on, you had just embarked on a new adventure as entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, I think so. Or at least it was pretty fresh to me. Whether it was, I can't remember the exact date, but yeah, just getting started the last time we talked.
Yeah, well, I remember, prior to your business, I mean, I think you just stood out as, in my mind, as somebody who had a really good pulse on how to create a positive, visible public persona in the social media age, and I think you added some real nice twists. I think also you were focused. I think you were a really good spokesperson for some of the companies you worked in the past about the challenges and tribulations of leading change management with big technology programs. So, how has that morphed as a business for you over the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, well, just as you said, Paul, so I started and it all actually comes together. I started as a teacher, moved into corporate training, and then moved into software sales. And towards the end of my tenure as a software sales rep, as many did, I changed my entire approach to everything during COVID, and I started creating content. And while I was doing that, I realized the power that comes from personal branding and really truly stepping into your unique perspectives and sharing your expertise as a way to build trust with people and get them to give you a shot at a conversation or doing business with you. And over time, then that kind of morphed into opportunities to take a stage and talk about change management and start building my speaking career. And about a year ago, just before our last conversation, I had kind of hit the point where I really wanted to team up with my husband, who was already doing kind of independent marketing and sales consulting. And we wanted to build out a framework that would help other people realize the success that we both had as salespeople, leveraging digital growth strategies. But then, even though it's still a little bit separate, I feel like it's very tied to change management and digital transformation was where I built my career. It's where I have most of my direct experience in helping businesses. So I still do a lot of speaking on that side. But the way that we look at what we kind of offer from Roloff Consulting's perspective is that we're helping people digitally transform their sales and marketing approach. So they feel kind of disconnected, but in my mind, they're very much one and the same. And so it's where you're kind of applying those transformation efforts, which department. And I think oftentimes we're very focused on the back end of processes and adding efficiencies there, that there's a lot of companies that have forgotten about the front end and really helping people buy the way that they want to, as opposed to trying to deal with this friction that comes with trying to stay with old traditional methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your frameworks kind of get locked in how your operations work versus what the customer buying experience preferences are. Emma, can you talk a little bit about, without giving away your secret sauce, talk a little bit about the framework that you referenced, like if I'm out here as an agent or an agency interested in what that digital branding transformation might look like, kind of where do I start?
Yeah. So, at its highest level, our framework is it's 3 simple steps. It's nothing overly complex. The secret sauce comes into the execution and your unique thought leadership. But our framework is educate, connect, and consult. And that's kind of almost like a sales funnel or a marketing funnel, but the very top piece of that is educational content. And oftentimes, I think, and I was guilty of it when I was in sales as well, marketing is the one-to-many. Sales is the one-to-one. And salespeople, whether that's a broker or an agent or a software sales rep, you name it, we're very comfortable in that one-to-one setting and interacting with people because we want to be able to give them that consultative experience. And what I found in my own experience, and my husband, my co-founder James, found in his experience as well, is that as a salesperson with all of that expertise and that one-to-one experience that you have, social media gives you the way to tap into taking a one-to-many approach with that same expertise and consultative thought process that we would have used in those one-to-one interactions. And the difference of it coming from a business owner or a salesperson, or basically that person that's that first line interacting with a customer, is that by the time that you get into a meeting with them, if you've been building thought leadership and creating content that educates them, you're building trust and authority along the way. So it speeds up your sales cycle. It helps make sure that that customer gives you the opportunity in the first place to be a part of the conversation. And it, again, creates these relationships that are built on this foundation of trust that comes from the fact that you know your stuff. So when it comes to, and Paul, I know you create a lot of content, and I'm sure you guys all feel this. The biggest thing that people talk about is how hard it is to stay consistent and continue to create content. And that is ultimately, that's the secret sauce, is can you show up every day or 3 times a week and consistently show people that you have the expertise and the knowledge that they need to solve a problem? Because it's really hard to fake it every single day. You can fake 1 post a month and maybe look kind of intelligent, but you can, it's really difficult to show up consistently and help people solve their problems that way unless you know what you're talking about. And that's where that inherent trust and authority kind of comes into the whole equation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Building that trust and just the rapport, right, to draw people in.
I was wondering if you could just demystify every single one of these platforms in the context of our industry. How should we think about? How should we leverage them? Which one does what for which purpose?
Yeah, so I think that there is a little bit of choice that every individual is going to have to make based off of their direct target. And really understanding where their target scrolls for leisure, where they scroll for business. And, if somebody is focused on commercial business, that's going to be different than like in the P&C world where someone might be focused on personal lines coverage. LinkedIn is obviously where you're going to get a lot of professional people. So whether you are trying to sell something to them as an individual or as like on the commercial side of things, there's still large potential for people if you are looking for higher economic earners or people that are, again, going to be like in office jobs or interacting with that platform. There's still a lot of space, even if you're not looking to do B2B, to market on LinkedIn and educate people on LinkedIn. But again, within the LinkedIn platform, there is some nuances to the kind of content that people typically think we should be posting on LinkedIn. And I will say, take any idea of what you think, beyond being vulgar or inappropriate, take any idea of what you think you should be posting on LinkedIn and go ahead and toss it out the window. Because some of the people that I've seen be most successful, including myself, kind of buck what we see as professional content, and it stands out on the feed a lot more than it would on other platforms. So there are people that are creating meme content and generating hundreds of thousands of dollars for their business. I I am well known for creating TikTok style type content and repurposing it over to LinkedIn. And those are the posts that oftentimes do best because it just stands out and looks so different. So if you are targeting business professionals that would be on the platform, again, whether it's for B2B or personal, that's kind of where I see LinkedIn fitting. The other piece that I would say to everybody is LinkedIn is now trying to play the catch-up game with every other platform when it comes to video. And they are experimenting with creating a video feed. They are pushing video content. So whether that is creating videos that have your face or do not, video content is going to start to really kind of like take off on the platform. And there's a lot of opportunity there for that. For the other platforms like Facebook, especially for agents and brokers, Facebook can be a really, really good spot, but you have to, again, kind of like focus on who your target is and whether they're there. Now, if you are targeting 25 to 45-year-olds, Facebook is probably not your platform. If you're focused on 45 and up, Facebook might be a really nice spot to get your target demographic. So it's, again, kind of thinking about who your buyer is and where they do their leisure scrolling. Then when you're looking at like somewhere probably a little bit of the Facebook crowd and a little bit of the younger crowd, that median realm, that's where I see Instagram being a really effective platform for marketing. And then it will surprise people, but TikTok has actually got a wide spread of people across all different age groups. So they have most of the younger demographic on the platform interacting with content there. But over the last 2 years, they've actually had higher growth in the ages 30 and up than any other platform. So targeting, you can get really specific with the type of content that you're creating on LinkedIn because the algorithm is so strong. And the same thing with Instagram. I always suggest to people, and then I guess the last one is YouTube. And especially for informational content, if you're consistently showing up on YouTube, I've found that even without a lot of like effort on that platform, if you're continuously showing up with content, YouTube will push your content to the right people and you will see results there as well. The biggest thing that I would say to people is pick like one to get started and think about where your target is going to be and don't try to spread yourself too thin. So think through where are you going to find most of the people that you're looking for. And then once you get comfortable with communicating with them through that platform and creating content that's resonating with them, then expand to maybe one or two other platforms and see where you can reuse or repurpose content again so it doesn't become overwhelming. So like for me, my main platform at this point is actually TikTok. That's where I create most of my content. And then I will take some of that content and repurpose it to LinkedIn and some of that content and repurpose it to YouTube. So that I'm creating once, I have one central platform where I'm seeing most of my growth, and then I'm repurposing things. And then on LinkedIn is kind of my secondary large platform. I have content that I create directly for my audience there. So I would say kind of pick one, get good there, and then see where you can grow from there so that you don't burn yourself out or feel like it's too much to manage.
This is really helpful, Emma. I'm just going to push a little farther and get your perspective. I'd like you to tell me, hey, Paul, you're wrong, right, in some of these. You've hit on key segments who listen to our show. So, for instance, I think we've got a number of agents who are marketing to customers. So, B2C. We have marketers, people inside IMOs who are marketing to agents. So, I guess arguably B2B. And then we have a lot of people who are selling services into insurance companies, or they're in an insurance company engaging in other insurance industries. So you kind of hit the LinkedIn for the. I think you did a good job there. I agree. I think it feels to me like the platform is they're trying to grow up. I got this beta test on their video feeds, and it'll get there. It will with the content they're picking, but. Feels to me like if I'm trying to talk to agents, a lot of them are out in YouTube. And I only say this, Emma, because I see the commercials that people are buying. Do you feel like a lot of agents are hanging out on YouTube? If that's where I'm trying to go, should I be hanging out there instead of TikTok to talk to them? Or would you say, no, Paul, go to TikTok?
I think it depends on the kind of content you're comfortable creating, honestly. So the reason that I say that is I think that there is an audience in both. The challenge with YouTube is it's more long form content, and the platform is a little bit more saturated. So because there have been so many people creating on YouTube for such a long time, to get to the point where you are the video that shows up if somebody is searching for that term, or you're the account that starts to get pushed, your build up time may take a little bit longer on YouTube than it would take on some of the other platforms that are more meant for virality, if that makes sense. When you look at a platform, and I would say and I'm going to kind of talk about TikTok and Instagram, probably like Instagram Reels is like a category. When you look at that type of content, it's been designed to kind of help pop people up with these crazy viral videos. And you can see growth on your account, or you can see growth in like your follower count really quickly if you hit on something that like really drives home for somebody. And the way that those platforms work, YouTube, you can go to shorts and you can scroll and maybe discover some new people. But typically when you're on YouTube, you're going and you're looking at suggested videos that are coming up. And you might, if you're watching a half an hour long video, do you have the time to continue to watch another half an hour long video, or do you watch, consume, and leave? TikTok and Reels are set up so that people can consume and can continue in this loop. And so if you hit the feed the right way, you can get pushed to a lot of people really, really quickly if you're hitting on something that's really topical. So I think it depends on what kind of content you're comfortable with. If 2 to 4, 5 minutes videos where you're breaking down one concept or talking about a controversial issue or something that's gone through where you want to educate people about how a law is going to change something for them, TikTok or Reels might be a really good spot to do that. And if you're more comfortable in, like, I would say 5 to 10 plus minute videos that maybe are a little higher production, YouTube would be a better spot. Demographic wise though, Paul, I wouldn't argue with you that there's a lot of agents that live on YouTube. But I also would say there's a lot of them that are out on Facebook still. Some of the most active agent groups I've ever seen are Facebook groups, and they are highly engaged and there's tons of conversation going on, but they're like private agency owner groups that are a little bit harder to get into, but you know that your demographic is there and interacting with the platform. So I would say age-wise, it wouldn't surprise me that they would also be on YouTube kind of consuming content on this more established platform.
Okay. One more question and I'll throw it over to Bruno and Tisa, but reaching our clients, they're old. I'm young. They're all old. Average age for an annuity buyer is 68. Now we had Alex Costa. I don't know if you've met him. He's been doing some real interesting Facebook marketing for agents. Now he was on our show and said, be on Facebook. Don't bother anything else. If you're trying to find these retirees, go to Facebook. Oh, by the way, Emma, he says he's coaching his client, his agents to do not just like a couple of videos, but like 20, 30, 40 every 2 months to put these into ad circulation to run. Like, how would you respond and react to that? Is that the right strategy? What are the challenges, to create that much content? Or what would somebody else do if they can't afford to work with, somebody like Alex? They're doing this on their own.
So first, like if you're over 65 and you're targeting that group, there's going to be a subset of them that are definitely on Facebook. I would disagree with the argument that should be the only platform that you focus on, because like I think of my dad. My dad's not on Facebook. My dad's on Instagram. And my dad's watching Reels on Instagram. He's not going anywhere near TikTok, but that's because I was too old for the TikTok craze, so he didn't need to have a TikTok to monitor my behavior. But you better believe when I was in college, he got an Instagram to figure out what I was doing. And 5-10 years from now, all of those people that have kids that are high school, college age now that are on TikTok, that have got an account to monitor their kids, but found out about recipes or race car driving videos or horse videos or you name whatever their algorithm has now shifted them to, they are now hooked on that platform. But that's probably like the 45 to 55 age group. So I wouldn't say that like once people hit 65, they're relegated only to the pasture of Facebook. I think that there's room for there to be variability and like to be able to reach people beyond that. But what you can do is you can create that video content that he was suggesting, and you can put it on both platforms. And you can even experiment with, maybe you're going to put your ad dollars towards Facebook, but you're going to just try and do that same content organically on Instagram. If you're creating video content, you can put it on both platforms. So that's like the big piece again, like maybe you think through your strategy of reaching your target audience and you create that content for one platform. And maybe that's where you focus the majority of your efforts. Like I said, my main platform is TikTok. Then you repurpose over somewhere else to see if you can hit your demographic in a different area. The one thing that I would say about platforms like Facebook or X or things like that is, again, like Facebook has done a really good job of monetizing their platform. And they have done a really good job of making organic growth really difficult. So if you are somebody that doesn't have a huge budget or doesn't have the ability to bring someone in who knows all of the nuances of like purchasing ads and those types of things, organic growth and getting traction on your content is actually going to be easier on a platform like Instagram. I would say Instagram is still owned by Meta, so they know how to play the game of monetization, and they definitely know the game of like making companies pay to get seen. But especially if you're a solo or, small business entrepreneur, you can have a personal account on Instagram that creates content that educates people about the fact that about X, Y, and Z. And you can kind of like sneak around some of those loopholes the same way that you can on TikTok. Like I have a personal account on TikTok. I'm not a company page. So I can create content. I can use trending sounds. I can do all of these things that businesses aren't allowed to do without paying. And so that kind of also maybe segues us into a little bit of like personal brand versus company brand and how does that operate on these different platforms. But across the board, if you don't have a big budget, invest in your personal brand and educating people through your personal brand and your personal accounts. And you're going to see more organic growth than you would get trying to do it through a business page.
Yeah, that's a good point on budget. I'm glad you brought that up, in particular about Facebook and just being able to get a presence. If you have no budget or a low budget, some of these other platforms are definitely going to be easier to kind of crack into the algorithm. Since we did segue into personal branding, let's talk a little bit more about that. So we've already talked about this idea of generating content and educating top of funnel, getting yourself out there as the authority. Can we just expand on that a little bit more? Tips around personal branding or where to start there?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, so we have at Roloff Consulting, we run something that we call the Catalyst community. And one of the things that we do on like a quarterly basis with that community is we run a personal branding workshop where we do kind of like we work through this activity of really thinking through what your personal brand is the same way that companies almost do it. So I think a lot of times people get really caught up in the idea of I need to create content and I need to crank out content. And the focus of a personal brand is to have it speak for you before you walk in the room. You want your personal brand to have a strategy behind it so that before you ever walk into a room, somebody knows who you are and what you're about. And the way that we kind of guide people through that is like almost a little bit like, I think the last time we ran this workshop, someone said it felt a little bit like a therapy session, but like thinking about like as an individual, and this isn't all caught up in or completely tied to your company either. Whether you're the founder or owner or whatever, it's there is some nuance to this. It is separate than your company brand, but it's thinking about what your values are, what you want to be known for, and really thinking through, like, it sounds simple questions at the top level, but when you kind of start digging into it, it gets a little bit more nuanced. Like, who are you? What do you do? And who do you do it for? And those questions, again, are very high level questions. But when you start diving into, like, who am I? Well, there's a lot more to that than just what your job title is. And your personal brand, if you want people to feel connected to you and trust you, should show a little of that. Nobody on the internet knows every nuance of me. Nobody on the internet knows everything about anybody, because, like, you get what they show you through the window. But at the same time, people know that I make up words because I do that in my videos. People know that I'm, like, decently clumsy because I've made videos about analogies tied to that. They know that I've got small kids because I'll pull those little bits and pieces of stories or things that I have experienced in my life into what my content looks like. So those pieces of who I am show up as well. And then after you've kind of gone through that experience of thinking through who you are, what you do, which is more tied to your company, and who you do it for is more tied to that, like, ideal buyer or your target for your content, then you start to think through, okay, now how do I take these pieces, like all the stuff I've laid out, and organize it into categories or content pillars that we can talk about, or that I can, like, show up and talk about regularly. And usually we suggest that people have about 3 different content pillars that they talk about. And then you start to look at, like, okay, so what are the different kinds of things that I can create in that content pillar that will then allow me to show up consistently, because I've taken some of the guesswork of the content that I'm creating out. So for myself, as an example, when I look at who I am, I obviously mentioned that I'm a mom. That's a part, like, I am a working parent who travels a lot. So sometimes that shows up in my content. Our business is focused on helping people build their personal brands and grow their company with digital growth strategies. So that's a part of my content. And then the last piece is I am truthfully a change management nerd that is closely tied to digital transformation. And even though I'm not selling any of that stuff, I'm not going to stop talking about it because I'm passionate about it. So those are my 3 content pillars. And then when I look at that, the first piece of digital transformation and change management, I have Leading Change as a series where I create content surrounding that. And that's an interview series that I do. And so there is continuously content that is in that category that falls under that pillar. From the personal branding standpoint, I'm continuously talking about what we do, helping other people, giving them tips and tricks, similar to what we're talking about here. Hopefully, I'm giving actionable insights that people can take and run with, even if they choose not to work with us. And that's kind of the focus there. And then, anybody that follows me knows that you get content that is a bit more lighthearted after I get back from a conference, that shows a little bit more of my personality. Maybe it focuses on what it's like to be like that working, traveling parent, or any of those different things. But I've got kind of, now I have my pillars in mind. I have my content components that fit into that. And now it's not so much coming up with ideas every day or trying to be like this super creative person that forces creativity at 9:00 when it's time to start something. It's, I know what I talk about. I know who I am. And when an idea strikes, it falls into these categories and falls into what I'm comfortable creating. And then it makes that content creation feel like a lot less of a chore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can see why the workshop is needed, because in that first question of who am I feel like at least the first 10, 15 years of my career, it was sort of check who you are at the door, right? And show up to work, leave the working parent, leave the whatever outside and show up to work to do your job. And I feel like in the last, call it 5 years, this idea of authenticity and showing up as your whole self has become much more the conversation. But all the more reason for that pause to truly ask, like, who am I? What are my pillars of content? And then go from there. So that's super helpful.
Well, and I've had conversations with other people too, where, like, a part of their pillar is, I really care a lot about sustainability. It has nothing to do with my job. It has nothing to do with, like, what I'm focused on day to day, but this is something I really care about. And I care about how insurance can help that. So that is a content pillar for them, because that is something that they're truly passionate about that fits outside of maybe what their job role would be which like on LinkedIn, people feel like they have to show up as their job role as opposed to their person. And I think that's where the biggest kind of difference is like to what you were saying, like you can show up as you and you should.
Yeah. Let me just double click on your content and we'll come back and pivot. I've got a great lightning round, Bruno, and Tisa,
Okay.
just you wait. But it feels to me, and this may be a little dated because I've watched you sort of change your message, but I think you're really speaking to a group of people who feel like they are caught in the rinse cycle of these big IT projects. I don't know how I got stuffed in this thing. This is rotating, doesn't make any sense. I guess right or wrong, and if you're speaking to those people, what kind of advice are you giving them today? Because so many of these projects just seem like they've landed like asteroids. You've got some crazy deadline that makes no sense except that there was a check the box on something on a certain date on somebody's PowerPoint. What are you telling them today?
So, Paul, you hit on it, but I would say that there's two groups that I focus on. So there's the people that are stuck in the rinse cycle, and then there's the people that are pressing the buttons on the washing machine. And I make content for both of them. And the reason that I make content for both of them is, unfortunately, the content for those people that are stuck in that rinse cycle isn't necessarily a lot about how they can change it, because they are kind of stuck in it right now. And it's more letting them know that they're not crazy, that it's a frustrating experience, helping them understand that there is probably a better way to do it, and helping them figure out the types of questions or things that are within their control that they can use to maybe start adding some clarity to why things are being done the way that they are, or at least impacting their skill set enough that they feel like they can take steps to change how things are being approached. And then on the executive level, the leadership level, it's talking to them about what their team is feeling. Because truthfully, what I've seen, and again, kind of going back to these different platforms, I started creating content on LinkedIn, and I started talking about change management because of what I was seeing in the field, and then I kind of started to talk about it a lot, and had all of these people that were like, yes, I full-heartedly believe we need to lead with a why. People are the most important part. And I started kind of questioning to myself, like, am I making this problem up? Like, I have so many people on LinkedIn that are agreeing with me that, like, maybe it's not as big of an issue as I used to think it was. And then when I started to actually get traction on my content on TikTok, and I started creating this content there, then I saw this huge group of people that are stuck in that spin cycle that are talking about these problems on a different platform, because on LinkedIn, when they're attached to their employer, they're not going to share what's actually going on. They're not going to tell you how ugly it is. And they might chime in the comments and say, you're right, people should be the focus. And it's kind of like, and let me tell you about what's going on. And so when I'm on a different platform where it's not tied to people's employers, I get these like real raw viewpoints of what's happening. And I get these direct messages from people from very large companies where, again, they won't tell me in the comments on TikTok, but maybe they'll send me a message of, I work in this place and this is what's going on right now. And you're like, ooh, okay, well, geez, I guess there is a problem here. And I guess there is something going on. And so part of my content on LinkedIn now is speaking to those executives and helping them hear that voice that maybe they're not getting because communication cycles are broken down. And it's giving them the ideas and the thought processes and the actionable tips that they can take to change the cycle that we're all stuck in. So helping them understand that, like, not only do they need to be building digital literacy as an executive, but they need to be helping their team build those skills. And that they need to be setting realistic expectations, that they need to fall in love with a problem instead of a solution, that they have to have a vision for their company. Things like, if you have an AI strategy, you're doing it wrong, because you should have a business strategy that's supported by technology. That is a message that goes towards that executive team. And then hopefully that helps change that trajectory of what's happening to all of the employees that are stuck in that constant random acts of technology hellhole.
I was going to ask you about, you said you make up words, but that's not necessarily made up, but I was going to ask you about your random acts of technology. So you just defined it for us. So that analogy is super helpful too, because I immediately think about like having the power to push the buttons and the difference of like delicate and, warm, cold versus heavy duty and hot, right? And so I won't go further there, but there's been some times where I feel like I'm in the latter, not the first. But
and that's actually, that's such a good analogy of thinking through exactly what it is. And like some projects take a different finesse than other projects, just the same way that like you can't throw one load of laundry in and just hope that what you set the last one to is going to work, or you might end up with a whole bunch of pink clothes. And like, see that there is a thought process that needs to go into it that I think, and to executives' credit, they are dealing with board members and all sorts of their own KPIs and their own dynamics of things that are broken at that level too, that make it really difficult to do these things. But even just as small as getting them to realize that you need to be thoughtful about the people that are impacted by this. And like you need to have a thought process around how you're going to help them get used to the change. Even if it's not perfect, if you're leading with a little bit of change management instead of just driving it through and hoping that it sticks, that can make a big difference. So my hope is that even just a little bit of it coming through makes a difference. And then at the level where people are stuck in that, the amount of times that I've gotten messages about like videos on TikTok or that kind of thing of like, I just like really appreciate that even though I'm in this right now and I'm feeling it, you at least made me smile and realize I'm not alone. Like that means something to me and that matters as well.
Yeah. It's creating that community. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We're going to switch to this lightning round. Okay. Bruno Tisa, you're okay.
Ready.
Bruno, okay, has written this great book. It is actually timeless about retirement planning. Okay. He's been an analyst. Bruno, you're going to help me. But you've been an InsurTech startup founder. Okay. You've been a catalyst for change inside big organizations to get them focused on retirement. What should he be posting about, Emma? So you're going to give him, what's his prescription? Where should he be spending his time? What should he be doing with his content and his message?
Ooh, okay.
Sorry, he's the host of an incredibly successful annuity podcast. Sorry.
Well, one, the really easy part is sharing the podcast. That's going to be number one, and that's going to be one of your content pillars. Number two, if you've got this book, I'm assuming part of writing the book was so that hopefully you get it into the hands of the right people. So maybe it is a small series where you give one tip from each chapter of the book over the course of how many weeks that the book spans. So if the book is 10 chapters, you've got 10 weeks of content because you're going to go chapter by chapter and look for one tip that you can take from that book and share it. And you want to think about a tip that's in that chapter or a excerpt or a quote or something that's going to make your target audience be like, ooh, I got to go buy that book and I need to read it. And then all of a sudden you've got your podcast to post once a week and you've got this 10-week series where you're able to create content from the book and you're hitting your target demographic and you're showing up consistently enough where you're going to show up on their feed when they log on. And then if you want to get really crazy and add in a third one, maybe you do something like lessons learned from being an InsurTech startup founder. And you give people the tips that you wish you had known as a founder when you were getting started. Again, span it as many tips as you've got weeks long. And that could be your video content. And you make those videos with your phone. You don't do anything super fancy with them. You just talk to people and you talk to them like you would if you were in the room with them. And suddenly you've got 3 days a week of content that's targeted towards your demographic that helps you push all of the things that are unique about you.
And so should I listen to your lessons to get comfortable with LinkedIn and then add on to the leverage the content for YouTube? TikTok, I don't know if I'm there yet.
That's okay. Get the video content onto LinkedIn and take advantage of the fact that they're pushing it. And one thing to add to that I didn't mention when we were talking about LinkedIn before, all of these other platforms are built with kind of creators at the center. LinkedIn was built with like this idea of being a resume at the center originally, and now they're trying to come around to this idea of the creator economy. So when you look at the amount of people that are posting on LinkedIn in comparison to other platforms, it literally is 1% of people that are on LinkedIn that actually create. And then I think it's like 3% that even like interact. So there's so many people that are lurking and watching that are on that platform that are there hoping for somebody to create content, that you've got this really captive audience, if it's the right audience for you, that you can really take advantage of and stand out quickly with 1 to 2 to 3 posts a week. It doesn't need to be every day to stand out.
So 1% and 3%. So 1% being creating content and 3% being active.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Not that they're not logging in active wise.
Right.
That's like people that are commenting and that kind of thing. There's much, much more of that user population that are logging in and consuming. And I'll have to look up the 3%. I'm not sure if that's off the top of my head the right percentage. I know the 1% though for sure. So you've got this group of people that are thirsty for content, and there's not a lot of people that are creating it.
Okay, Bruno, will you click on the screen and give Emma a heart for that one? Okay. Yes? Sold?
Yes, and as soon as I find how to do that, I'll give a heart to you too as well. But that's why I needed that lesson so bad. So, but thank you for triggering it. So
yeah,
I was taking notes, by the way.
All right, Tisa's up next. Okay, now Tisa's interesting, right? On the surface, there are 2 Tisas. Okay, there's the Tisa at work who does all of the IT stuff. I mean, she's run the projects, she's pushed the button, she's been in the machine. she's picked the soap and put it in, right? It's like she's done everything. Oh, and the other side of her is she's super connected in the community. I mean, she just raised like she's $1 million for the United Way, for the Power of the Purse.
Wow.
She's on a couple of boards. She's been all. Okay, wait a second. She posts this stuff over here in the Hartford community. She's going to get on one algorithm. She starts posting about all of the digital operations stuff. That's going to be another algorithm. What does she do?
I don't think it's going to be as separate as you think it is, because Tisa, what you're doing in your community is something that a lot of people would admire, even if they don't live in Hartford. And especially if it's groups like United Way, where you're helping raise $1 million with a team or not, you're still raising $1 million that probably goes into a national fund of some part, or even a regional fund of some capacity, where you're impacting more than just your direct neighbors. And if you start to tap into how you use social media to do that at like the level of the community that you're tapped into on LinkedIn, you might be able to make an even bigger impact outside of just your direct region and the Hartford area directly. So maybe you help with a national campaign, or maybe you get people from all across the country to help support what you're doing in your area. So I wouldn't dissuade you from posting about that, because it's probably something that's near and dear to your heart. Similar to some of the stuff that I said to Bruno, I think you could do, especially if you're involved with multiple boards and multiple organizations, you could do things like spotlighting the organizations that you support, or maybe offshoots of it that have like national, like I'm really involved with the Hartford group here. Here's the way for you to find out what branch you can support, and doing those kinds of spotlights. I've seen people recently doing things called Follow Fridays, where they share either a specific person or an organization that they think other people should follow and support. And so, like, for example, there's a group called Rise Professionals that focuses on career development within the insurance industry that I sit on the board with. They had their conference a week ago. Somebody came to that conference for the first time. Her name's Audrey, and Audrey made this wonderful post on a Follow Friday about how everyone should go and support the organization. Not only does it help her talk about something that she's passionate about and show her passion, but hopefully it helps that organization. So that would be that side of it. from the, you know, if you've been all through from the spin cycle to the point where you're choosing the soap and pressing the buttons, you probably have a really unique view, especially depending on how recent it's been too, of what it's like to be in that spin cycle. And maybe like how as a leader you chose to lead differently because of that. So you could do something about like leadership principles that came from like, you know, working your way up. You could talk specifically about different types of technologies if there's things that you're like passionate about right now. You know, I think the last time that we talked, we got like really excited about talking through the nuances of AI, but also some of the cautions and like how to lead that appropriately. So maybe you start a series with like lessons of like IT leadership and how they apply to AI and making sure that we're not doing it the wrong way. So there's probably, without going into too much detail about all of the experience of the projects that you've led and stuff like that, there's probably a lot of different ways that you could break down that information and share it with other people that are maybe stepping into a management position for the first time, or maybe accidentally being good at their job and being promoted to leadership and not knowing what that means or how to do it. They would probably find great value in kind of that time-tested knowledge.
Yes, I like the Follow Fridays, and I'm going to have to look up. I feel like Audrey might be an agency owner that we know. Like, so I'm curious if it's the same Audrey. I feel like I saw that post.
She's not an agency owner. She does recruiting.
Okay.
But if she's, I'm sure there's more than one doing great things.
I was like, let me look it up and see. I feel like that's a familiar post, but both pillars resonate with me. And you're absolutely correct. A lot of what I do locally does have a national affiliation, and there's ways to say I'm doing this in Hartford, but hey, there's a chapter in Dallas, right? You could get involved too. So definitely some sage advice there. So if you see a Follow Friday next Friday, or maybe this Friday, I'll give you some credit.
Woohoo!
Emma, you didn't think you were going to do this.
I didn't know.
Now the pressure's on Bruno and I to like quickly capture.
We didn't know either. So.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're right at the end of time here. So okay. Yeah, I escape it. But hey, listen, thanks so much for your time. I think what you're doing out in LinkedIn and these conferences is great. I think I see you building a great community of not only people in the insurance business. I think there's some really interesting work you've been doing, kind of building a community of women in the insurance sector. I think it's been great. Thanks for all you're doing for us, Emma, and can't wait to get you back on again sometime in the future. Yeah. How should people find you? It's easy.
Yeah, LinkedIn, Emma Roloff. Just the one tricky part is I've got one M in my name. And then same thing, if you search Emma Roloff, I will show up on TikTok that way, or my handle there is Transformation Princess. There's a story there for maybe the next podcast. And on YouTube, it's Leading Change is the channel there to follow me as well.
Cool. All right. Hey, listen, thanks so much, Bruno, Tisa. Thanks for your time. For all your listeners, thank you for joining us. Be sure to share this episode and more with your friends. And most importantly, join us again next week for another episode of That Annuity Show. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information at thatannuityshow.com.